Draft boards are built in one specific way. It's not just one prospect, it's tiers, clusters, clumps, whatever you want to call it. They go in groups, and we're going to run them down today on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. This Thursday show is brought to you by Monopoly Go. You can get in there, and you have to admit it, when you're competitive, you want to get actually, you're a big fan of Monopoly Go, you're going to enjoy the mobile hit twist on the classic Monopoly game. So join your friends, download Monopoly Go now for free on the Apple Store or Google Play. We're going to get into how you're going to roll up those things, whether you land on Go or not, for defensive pass rushers. Got to have some of that come in, fresh blood into this defensive rotation. Where are the receiver rumblings right now? Who's moving up? Who's moving down? Who are we maybe off on in the media that the teams have a different view on? And we're going to start with the offensive tackles with Chris Clark here from Chiefs Corner. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting. You can get all of Chris's work on the corner. You can get it on the quarterbacks and the cap and the way you build rosters. Same thing for me on rogueapc.com, where you can get the athletic matrix and the NFL draft guide. It is screaming off the shelves. Use the code LOCKED, LOC, Locked On Chiefs, that is LOC for short, to get a discount over at rogueapc.com right now. You can find more on my top fives and my whole staff on NFL33.com, as well as RGR Football. And you can get even more information on the Insider text line. You locals, you already know this stuff, but we appreciate you. And if you want to get in on the inside, it's 816-357-8781. Now, we have a lot to go over.
Really quick on that text line, be ready for some stuff on the draft night. Draft weekend for that matter. It's coming. This is the time where we get to have time, and we're going to be doing some stuff on the text line that you won't be getting on the podcast, just because that's the way it works. I mean, the text line, we can send out one text and have conversations. So be looking for that coming very soon with the draft just a week away at this point. That's the crazy thing to me.
Yeah, it's coming fast. You'll have exclusives on the text line as well. If we're hearing rumblings about a trade up, we're going to let you know on the text line first. If you want to be ahead of the curve, go get on it. I'm looking for when you have to trade, what you have to do, and what the groups are that are available. I call them tiers. Some people call them clusters. Some people just throw a list out. And in the end, most teams end up with bands across their board that have groups of players. So if you're not targeting a player, when you target a player, you generally get in trouble, but you're going to have a group. So if you say are on the clock in 3 picks and you have 4 prospects in a cluster that you're looking for, you're going to be in good shape because you're going to get one of them. Is it maybe your first selection? No, but you're going to be in a group. So it comes down to breaking down those groups, and offensive tackles are really, really interesting right now. There's at least 3-4 guys that I have on my tackle board that necessarily some of the other big media outlets have as guards. There's a lot of changes. And from the top to the bottom, clusters are the way that you have to go, because the Chiefs are going to be looking for talent at that position.
Now, the big thing that to me that really sticks out on this is there are some that are looked at as just straight right tackles. And I think you can remove those guys from your cluster for the Chiefs. I don't think that that's the direction they're going to go. I suppose it's possible that they would look at moving Juwan Taylor over. But to me, I would think that you would be looking at a left tackle and a left tackle only for the Chiefs. I don't think that they want to move Juwan.
I don't think they want to either. I don't take them off my board because it's another option there, because the left tackles are going to be at a premium. So I leave them on there, but I do downgrade them. They come down my board if they're a right only. So, for instance, in the second tier, J.C. Latham is a top of a second-round pick for me because he's right only. I do not see him being able to go over to the left at all. And so for that, he gets a little minus from me. Is he really worth the first round? If you're going to plug him in especially a power scheme run team on the right-hand side where he's comfortable, he's easily a 20, maybe even top 15 pick. But for the Chiefs and for what I'm looking for in being able to run zone and power blocking schemes and being able to have some versatility, I'm looking for a left, and so he gets a ding there. And that's just one of the things in the top tiers. There's only 3 top left tackles in this group, and it's Joe Alt, Olive Fashanu, and Troy Fautano. It's very, very straightforward because Fuaga is a right tackle. Mims is a right tackle. And Leighton, I'm sorry. I always do that. Latham, not Leighton, is a right tackle. So the clusters are very, very clear when it comes to positional side.
Well, and that changes what Kansas City can do. You're probably going to see, I would think, all three of those left tackles gone, and probably the first 12 to 15 picks would be my guess. The quarterbacks and the receivers
fall, but
yeah, the quarterbacks and the receivers are going to push everybody else out. It's interesting because you start looking at what they're talking about with the NFL draft. They're talking about more than 20 players offensively going for the first time in the NFL draft history. That's how offensive heavy this draft is looked at, especially in the first round.
Yeah, and I think it might even get more so on draft night. It's also not a coincidence that there's only 13 prospects going to night one of the draft. That is by far the smallest number of actual prospects on scene to be drafted. Less than half are going to be present at the actual draft.
Yep. Now, the question I have is, are all 13 of those guys going to get drafted in the first round? I think from the list I saw, I would think that they are going to, but the NFL usually likes to have guys that are going to be there in the second round too.
Yep. There's a little bit of fall over usually, and someone is likely to fall out of it. Of those top two tiers, again, with the lefts at the top, then the right three guys, I also have the third tier pretty tightly as Tyler Guyton, Kingsley Suamataia, and Roger Rosengarten. Rosengarten has played predominantly right as well, whereas Guyton and Suamataia can play both and have experience at left. So it's a little bit of a mixed cluster there at tier 3, but it is right on the heels of the tier 2 guys. So I think it's going to be a thick run, high, like you said, maybe top 15, top 20 for the first 3 tackles. And then starting about 25, there's going to be a run through maybe 50. And you're going to see a ton of tackles come off the board.
Well, and if that happens for the Chiefs, that's going to be something that they're going to have to figure out. If they want one of those top 3, they're going to have to trade up. We've been talking about that all offseason. That's not going to be a surprise there. If they're happy with maybe taking Kingsley at left tackle, they could take him there at 32. The value isn't there, but we've talked about that too. It's going to be very hard to get somebody with anywhere close to a first round grade or value at 32, and you're not going to probably take any of the right tackles. So you're kind of limited at that point.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It does make. We're going to get into the same concept of where the wide receiver groupings are on the backside of this here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, you guys know me a little bit. If I had to tell you outright, you probably would not be surprised to hear that I'm a little bit competitive. And if that's true, you can understand why when I want to get my competitive side out, I want to go after some of the people that I know, my friends, my pals. It used to be a number of things. And right now, it's a big deal to be able to go play Monopoly Go. It's just the next thing that is dig in at your pals and get after. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded 150 million, thousand, billion times. And it's everywhere. It's a great twist on the Monopoly game that you've played before on a board, but you can play it anywhere with hundreds of variations, all kinds of boards in crazy locations, building up cities that bring you all kinds of big money. And the best part is messing with your friends. You can charge them rent. You can hit iconic properties. You can play like you do classic. You can also get in there and pull heists for vaults and riches for yourself. And you get yourself on the leaderboard. The biggest Monopoly tycoon wins, but it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with people too. So maybe you can pair up with pals to go get other friends. There's all kinds of ways to get huge rewards and time tournaments. So go get in the game right now. Bring your friends as well. It's download Monopoly Go. It is 2 words. It's free everywhere on the Apple Store and Google Play. If you guys want to see our host-run NFL mock draft, do not miss this show. It is tomorrow night, the 17th. I'm sorry, tonight, the 17th, as I get ahead of myself. Yep. At 7 Eastern, you're going to see it here very shortly after this show. Make sure that you are in on it. And I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised with what I was able to pull off against all the other hosts of the entire Locked On Network. It's on Locked On Sports today. We're going to send you there after this stream, but make sure that you're ready to see that on Locked On Sports Today, the feed here on YouTube and on Amazon Fire. Now, we spent a lot of time talking not just about the top 5 tackles. We probably spent inadvertently more time on the top tackle tiers. Wide receivers are A, more plentiful, B, you need more of them, and C, the tiers stretch a lot farther in this draft on that side. Chiefs are in on both of them.
Really quick, though, is there any tackle that is not in the top 3 tiers that you see being a left tackle, like a franchise guy that could start year 1?
No, I do not. I have Kieran Amagaje, I believe is how you pronounce it, from Yale, and Patrick Paul as the round 3 type guys. They're not instant starters. And I don't see anyone beyond that are. I will say the guy with the best shot that I think the Chiefs are going to be interested in is a guy named Theo Benedict, who plays at the University of British Columbia. He's the next Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, in my opinion. Chiefs have been up to see him, and so just keep that on your radar. He's a 6th-ish round pick, just like LDT was, but that's a nice little nugget there.
Chiefs like to get their guys in the back of the rounds, so that's definitely something to watch. So when we start looking at the wide receivers, if you go look at any mock draft, just about any of them at this point, I would say the top 3 wide receivers are easily gone by 6 or 7 at this point. I think that's probably going to be what's going to happen on draft day. Other than the only chance I think that maybe changes is if people start trading up to go get a QB, because I do think the first 3 picks are going to be quarterback. And then you look at what Arizona is going to do. I don't think they're going to pick it for. So your run on wide receivers is going to happen as long as somebody comes up to get a quarterback. Maybe it pushes them down a couple of picks, but I still think all 3 of the top 3 guys are gone in probably the top 10.
I don't necessarily disagree with you. The most interesting thing to me about it is that first tier of the wide receivers, because there are teams that clearly have Marvin Harrison number 1, and they have for the last 18 months. There are teams that have been put off by the lack of pre-draft process for him and Neighbors, but maybe they had Neighbors as a more explosive prospect. Maybe he's number 1 on their board. There are some teams in this league, as I understand, that have Roma Dunze number 1. And so for me, as I'm building out my tier, folks, and Monday, you should have my final draft board ready to go, downloadable at NFL33.com for free. You'll be able to have that every prospect where I would take them not only in the round, but in the top 2 rounds, broken out by thirds as well. I have it broken down a little bit differently. I have Harrison and Dunze as a tier to themselves. I do not have Neighbors up there with them. I have Neighbors and his teammate Brian Thomas as the 2 guys in the 2nd tier. And then I have the 3rd tier still starting in the 1st round.
Yeah. So how many deep does the 3rd tier go?
If I'm just counting the 3rd, I get to 5 receivers just in the 3rd tier. And that's probably starting at 6 or 7. So we're talking about 13, 14 players deep by the time we're through the 3rd tier.
Yeah, that's crazy. And you're going to be looking at guys that are going to potentially step in, and maybe they'll be their wide receiver 1 on their team. I mean, lots of different questions, lots of different players can go. When you're talking 13 guys, you're talking about a wide receiver class that this is, you and I talked about potentially taking wide receiver in the first 2 rounds. Mm-hmm. We've done mock drafts like that. I actually just did one on Chiefs Corner earlier this week, taking 2 wide receivers in the 1st round. The reason that keeps happening is, 1, there's so many of them, but 2, the team needs wide receivers, and the whole Rashid Rice situation is going to be something that will be played out over the next couple of months. We still don't know where that's going to land, but there is talk in the NFL that he's probably going to be suspended some games. So that makes it even more important that they go out and get a guy or 2 that can contribute this year.
Yeah. I generally agree with you. Now, Matt had a different opinion yesterday, and he's got me thinking. So tomorrow I'm going to freak out on Friday about, what if it isn't multiple? What if it's all got to be in one basket? What do you do, and how do you attack it? That is Freaky Friday tomorrow. We're going to go through a couple of the crazy scenarios for what is outlandish, but I think you guys will enjoy it. So don't miss tomorrow's show either. I will say this. Trading up is one thing, trading back is another. You can get, I think, starter level players at probably, I would go so far as to say 16, 17 in the wide receiver group. And that would be in the 3rd round.
To be clear, you're saying starter level is in how many wide receivers are on the field? 3? Just
yes, and 11 personnel. Yep, exactly.
Okay. Just wanted to verify that. I thought that's what you were saying, but wanted to verify. So you're talking going 17 deep, I mean, yeah, you have 32 rosters, so you're going to have, ton of different players, 96 guys that would start, but you're saying 17 of those could be from this draft. That's pretty impressive, and that would take this roster from where it was last year offensively to a whole new level in 2024.
Yeah, I have
Potentially.
to agree. And not just this, it's who else is gunning for them.
So then the other question becomes, is this the draft to trade? I mean, knowing where Kansas City is, knowing that they desperately need wide receiver help, is this the draft to say, okay, well, we really like this draft. This is a deep draft in two positions that we absolutely need, in tackle and in wide receiver. Is this the draft to possibly say, maybe we gives up some of our capital for next year? Maybe we go chase. I know we're going to talk about it a little bit on Freaky Friday. I get that. But is this the time to go maybe take some of that capital from next year and say, we like the prospects this year. We're going to go and chase, because look at all the wide receivers. Look at all the tackles. We haven't even talked about the pass rushers yet.
Yeah, that's very, very true. And I think it is worth the trade up in a couple of places. If you can get to the elite of the elite. Unfortunately, in the wide receiver tiers, it's harder to get up there. I think tier 2 is where you would have to go. If you're trading up for a Troy Frankler or an Adonai Mitchell, those are tier 3 guys for me. And they should be at the bottom of the first round in the last 8 picks is basically what that means. I don't think that's worth trading up for, unless you see a situation like McDuffie where someone actually falls to a spot that you can get to in order to take him. Okay, fine. But the left tackle scarcity and specificity, I think, is more important. And I think the difference between ending up Kingsley Suamataia, sorry, got to get that right, or Tyler Guyton, the alternative to that is spending more to get up to get one of the top 3 lefts. That is a bigger jump and a bigger disparity for me. So it would probably be more value in trying to attack it that way.
Well, and I'm not talking about necessarily having to trade up and go get one of the top tier guys. What I'm talking about is, you're saying that they're going 17 deep. I would imagine that those 17 deep are probably getting you into the 3rd round at wide receiver. If you find a way to get a tackle in the 1st round, and you find another way to get maybe a wide receiver in the 2nd, maybe it's worth giving up a 3rd round pick next year to go to try to get up higher in the 3rd round this year and go get another wide receiver. Like, it doesn't, I understand what you're saying about elite talent, and I get that. I'm not saying give up a 1st or 2nd rounder unless you're going after elite talent. I'm saying use your picks from next year to try to get the better guys that you're not going to have a chance to get normally, because they're going to be gone well before you get a chance to pick.
So you're thinking stay at 32, but move from 64 to 50 and 95 to 75 or something, right?
Right. Something similar to that. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And maybe you don't have to stay at 32. Maybe you trade up, a 4th rounder or, something to go get a tackle. Maybe that's what it costs you. I'm just saying, when you look at this draft and you look at the talent and where that talent is, and you look at what we've talked about this offseason with the price that wide receivers are going to be commanding in free agency and what tackles are getting paid right now, going and drafting guys in those 2 positions in a draft that is known, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but at least from everything I've seen and everything I've read, this is one of the best tackle classes and one of the best wide receiver classes that they've had in years. This is where you go when you try to get those guys. That's my whole point.
Yeah, get you some. There's plenty to go around. Make sure you get some. Don't get left out of that carousel.
Yep.
Now, it's a whole different thread on the other side of the ball. And as you said, it could be 20 offensive players selected in the 1st round. But what does that do to the rest of the value next on the Locked On Podcast Network?
Let's get straight to the point. You want to grow your portfolio to deal with the rising costs of inflation, to pay off your debt or mortgage, pretty much anything standing in the way of you and financial freedom, right? With Yahoo Finance, you can get access to the news, data, and tools that you need in order to help reach that financial freedom. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for the extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. They're the number one finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including your 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures that you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the number one financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com.
Locked On Sports Today feed is where you're at every day, all the time, without fail. All the top stories. Get it here on YouTube, where you can like, sub, and hit the bell, as well as this channel where you can like, sub, and hit that bell, as well as Amazon Fire TV. Check that out. Defensive tackle tiers is where we got to go, right?
Yeah, and getting to that, I want to ask this question. So we've talked about offensive tackles. We talked about wide receivers. So say Kansas City finds a way to get a wide receiver round one, and maybe they find a way to get one of the defensive tackles that we're about to talk about in round two. Is that maybe a situation where you're trading up in round three trying to go get somebody? I mean, to me, that's kind of the way this works, because you're looking at the DT pass rushers, which we're getting ready to talk about. And I would say most of those guys probably aren't first-round picks. I'm not saying there aren't any, but they're probably not mostly first-round picks. So maybe you get one of those guys in the second round and you end up having to trade up to go get one of the right receivers in round three. I mean, definitely different ways to go about it.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a lot of pressure. You have to go up to get them. They won't last in 95. So I hope that they're not in that situation, but you're right. That could be the way that it plays out, depending on the grades.
Yeah, when you look at all the tiers, that's the problem. I mean, Kansas City is always at the very back of the round, and the tiers have the players probably going much higher than you'd want to take them, or that the Chiefs would be able to get unless they do a trade up. So,
yeah, you're absolutely right. What they have to do is, if that opportunity exists, if the tiers are right, and when you're on the clock in the second round, or God forbid the first round, do you shift? And on the defensive line group, which is how you're going to make up for any lack or transition time that's needed in the secondary with L'Jarius's departure and having at least one new starter in that defensive backfield. In order to buy that time, you got to get better pressure.
Yep.
Now, they've been pretty good at producing pressure, and they've had a great rotation lately. If you can add more pass rush to it, that's the way that you need to go. And there are, again, not as many defensive prospects in the top 100, especially on the defensive line. There's only really one surefire first rounder on this board. That is Byron Murphy. He's in a tier of his own.
Yep.
Now, you can make arguments for Braden Fisk. You can make arguments for Johnny Newton. I think both of them are going to be fringe and possibly could pop into the first round by the time the weekend's over and I have my full completed draft board. But right now, they are the guys that are in the second tier. And again, they are alone. Not a whole lot of depth here. You get into the third, and the third tier might have to go between 45 and 60. That's Rukaroro, as well as I think Dwayne Carter is probably going to be in that group. Darius Robinson right on the fringe of that as well. Final grades, we're doing a little bit more film work just to try to smooth that out a little bit. Darius Robinson, by the way, Rogue Analytics and I myself, we are treating him as a defensive tackle that can, like Chris Jones, go out to the edge at times, not an edge that sometimes reduces.
Okay. Makes sense. And I think that there's some people that's the great thing about the NFL draft is there's so many people that see it so differently. And you're going to get different rankings from different people when they see players doing different things. So, no issues there. So the one guy I haven't heard from is Sweat. Where are you thinking he's going to run?
Before the DWI, I had him as a day 2 prospect, fringe-ish, right around that 60 to 70 range. Very
so
bottom.
That'd be tier 4?
He would be, yeah. He and Chris Jenkins would probably be in there. I'm putting Darius in the third, so
right.
That makes sense. Brandon Dorless, I don't think can compete with that because just the diversity. While they have similar grades on our boards, there is a diversity there of what they're capable of doing. Sweat is a unique prospect. Now, that said, 60 to 70 is one thing. I don't think he's done that. I think he's cost himself in a number of ways. The fact that he was in Kansas City this week for a visit. He's made some others, but it's not as robust a market as I thought pre-draft there would be. Doesn't necessarily mean anything. We've seen the Chiefs draft guys they'd never talked to in the pre-draft process. But I do feel now that it is now he's going to be happy to get in the top 100 and go in the third round.
That would be amazing if Kansas City could find a way to get him. Even if you have to make a move up, maybe you get your offensive tackle and you get your wide receiver in the first 2 rounds. If you have to trade up to, if you feel like he's going to go at 80, 85 and you have to trade up to go get him, I would love that just because he is going to command double teams when he is in, and that is going to change the math of how they block Kansas City's front. And that's what's important. Like, it's not so much how much pressure he gets, because that is another piece of all in and of itself. But if he is commanding double teams every time he's in, which he was doing in college on a regular basis, he is going to open things up for the rest of the guys on the roster, because they're not going to be able to guard them all with 5. If you have Chris Jones and Minihue and Dana and George Karlaftis and all the different pieces that the Chiefs have on this roster, I mean, you're only going to have 4 of them on the field at that point, but you're going to have pieces that you can put in there, and not all of them could be doubled, and it's going to cause havoc, and I'm going to love it.
I agree. And despite all the concerns, clearly maturity is one of them with the DWI and everything else.
Yep.
When you look at the actual pass rush stats, yes, Byron Murphy is number 1 in his pass rush win rate. He produces pressure like no other defensive tackle in this class. Sweat isn't that far behind. He is number 5 overall in pass rush win rate.
And I would also say that how much more, like, it's technically a pressure, and I get that, but how much more is it going to be impressive when he's walking 2 guys back into the quarterback's lap? Because that's what he's going to do.
Yeah.
That's what he's been doing on the field. That's what he's going to do. It's not going to be every snap, but if they have him on the field for third down and he does it, 10 or 15 snaps, that's plenty to produce enough pressure in the middle, let alone what you're going to be getting from your exterior guys and Chris Jones. Yeah,
absolutely. I think that there are a couple of other guys that are going to be able to contribute. I mentioned Dorless. I do think that the LSU guys, Jordan, Wingo, Smith, they're going to contribute in some way. They've got enough volume there. The guy that's sleepy right now that I don't really quite understand is Michael Hall Jr. Does have similarities to Mike Dana and the role that he can play. Talked about Mason. Miles Murphy can adequately take some space. Chiefs have been talking with Fabian Lovett of FSU. So there's a couple of other guys down the list, but that is the list. It's not as deep as edge, and certainly not as deep as offensive tackle and wide receiver.
Yeah, and those are guys that you're talking about when you get into tier 4, tier 5 that could be like potential starters, not necessarily day 1 starters, but starters down the road. Is that kind of the way you're looking at them?
Yeah, and even down into like the Lovetts and the Masons, Leonard Taylor, they're rotational guys. They're not year 1 starters. They might be able to ascend to a starter level year 2, year 3.
And Sweat probably isn't going to be a year 1 starter, especially with everybody that they're going to have in front of him. But that's not what you absolutely need. What you need is somebody that can step in certain scenarios and in rotation to be able to help the Chiefs with different things. And I will say at his weight, what he's going to be able to help with as well is short yardage situations as well. So definitely something else to consider.
I certainly hope so. Tiers are tough because you get a little bit of a panic when one starts because you got to get your guy. But especially on the defensive tackles, they are a little bit more spread apart and they are narrower. So it's going to take a little bit more targeting. We're going to incorporate how they need to go about that next week as we get ready for the actual NFL draft. We'll have wrap-up shows following every single day of the draft. I'll be live over on RGR. The majority of the time you can find me there, and then we'll come over here when the round ends. And what we're going to do from there in the meantime is get ready. We're going to have Freaky Friday tomorrow. We're going to get funky with it, see what we can come up with, and we will have our last and final mock draft Monday coming up in a few days. Don't miss either of those shows. Final. I know, right? It's here already. Good Lord, we're going to be in camp next week.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what it feels like.
So make sure you like, sub, hit that bell, get subbed on the audio platforms on Spotify, on Apple, etc. We're free 5 days a week. Plus, thank you, everydayers, for always being here for us and always listening to what we have to give you. And we're going to give you more. Freaky Friday tomorrow, mock draft Monday. Get ready for it. Thanks for being with us today.